Imagine Peter Pan standing at the edge of the forest, gazing out at the world of grown men. He never steps forward. He hovers, enchanted by freedom, yet secretly terrified of the weight of time. That image is not just a children's tale. It is a mirror we still carry. Inside many men, there lingers an eternal boy who clings to youth, resisting the slow, necessary gravity of adulthood. This boy is seductive. He whispers of freedom without consequence, of nights that never end, of love without responsibility. But his promise comes with a shadow. To never grow old is also to never grow whole. The same refusal that shields him from boredom also starves him of depth. There is a bittersweet quality here, the sweetness of possibility, the bitterness of never tasting the fruit because one never plants the tree. If you've felt the pull of endless youth, you're not alone. Many men live with the quiet ache that growing older means losing vitality, creativity, or desirability. Beneath that ache, though, lies another fear, that stepping into limits, into commitments, into structure, might expose weakness or even kill the spirit. Jung saw this in what he called the Puer Aeternus, the eternal youth archetype. It is not just about age, it is about a pattern, running from limits, and in doing so, running from the power that only boundaries can give. Notice how this shows up in daily life. In work, it may look like endless plans with little follow-through, grand visions without the anchor of discipline. In relationships, it may appear as attraction to partners who can never truly meet us, keeping intimacy always out of reach. In addictions, the eternal boy finds temporary flight, the scroll, the drink, the orgasm, the thrill that numbs the slow weight of responsibility. Even in spirituality, the boy may hide, bypassing the work of integration by chasing peak experiences while avoiding the grounding of daily practice. This isn't pathology. It's a cultural wound, as much as a personal one. Modern society rewards speed, novelty, and self-invention, while quietly punishing patience, depth, and continuity. Many men inherit the belief that adulthood is a kind of death, that to grow up is to lose wonder, to trade magic for monotony. No wonder so many hesitate at the threshold. But here's the hidden tension. By fleeing limits, the eternal boy flees his own power. A life without edges has no shape. A man without boundaries cannot know his strength. What feels like freedom can quickly become a cage of its own, with invisible bars of avoidance and repetition. So the question we begin with is not, how do we kill the boy? But what would it mean to bring him with us? To let his vitality mature? To let his wonder find ground? This journey isn't about exile. It's about integration, about learning how to root the dreamer in reality, so that his wings do not burn, but carry. As we move deeper, we'll trace how this archetype weaves through authority, pleasure, love, ambition, and finally creation. Each step will name the wound, bring it to light, and offer a practice to anchor freedom into form. And maybe, by the end, Peter Pan will not be banished. He will be invited to grow, not away from magic, but into it. Picture James Dean behind the wheel of a speeding car, cigarette smoke curling, eyes full of defiance. His rebellion became a cultural icon, freedom as fire, youth as protest. But beneath that image is something tragic. Rebellion without anchor becomes its own prison. It burns bright, but quickly, and often ends in collapse. Many men recognize this pattern in quieter ways. The refusal of authority, the resistance to rules, the instinct to push against any structure. It feels like liberation, but it leaves the axis missing. Beneath the surface, the flight from the father often hides a hunger for the father, not necessarily for the man himself, but for what the father archetype represents. Structure, axis, a steady vertical line to lean on when storms come. When that presence is absent, unreliable, or harsh, the boy learns to resist. He turns every rule into an enemy, yet the rebellion carries its own wound. To reject the father entirely is also to reject the inner compass that longs for alignment. Jung called this the Puer Aeternus in its inflated form, the boy who avoids individuation by clinging to fantasies of omnipotence. He imagines himself outside of limits, superior to rules, unconstrained by authority. But inflation is fragile. It bursts easily. Underneath the fantasy of independence lies a deeper fear. If I step into structure, I will lose myself. If I submit to any order, I will disappear. This is why rebellion so often remains bound to the very authority it rejects. To define oneself only against the Father is still to be chained to him. You may notice how this plays out in subtle ways. The man who refuses every boss becomes secretly obsessed with proving himself against authority figures. The man who rejects rules outright may still find himself haunted by guilt, as if the ghost of the Father is watching. What looks like defiance is often dependence in disguise. The axis is missing, but the longing for it never leaves. There is a counterintuitive truth here. To accept limits does not mean becoming smaller. It means discovering the vertical line within. A rule rejected may still point to something craved. Imagine for a moment writing down 3 rules or expectations you have always resisted. Then ask quietly, is there a part of me that still longs for the stability those rules might have offered? This is not obedience. It is recognition. It is a way of reclaiming the axis not from outside, but from within. Think again of James Dean. His rebellion made him a legend, but also left him untethered. A fire without wood burns itself out. The eternal boy who flees the Father imagines he is escaping control. In truth, he is running from the very structure that could steady his flame. The path forward is not blind obedience, nor endless rebellion. It is to find the axis within, to let structure become fuel for freedom, not its enemy. Imagine a man late at night, phone glowing in the dark. His thumb scrolls endlessly, chasing novelty with each swipe. Hours slip by. He tells himself he is free. No one can dictate how he spends his time. Yet when dawn comes, he feels hollow. This is the digital neverland, where dopamine keeps the boy busy but never fulfilled. The shadow underneath is easy to miss. Pleasure is not wrong. It is part of being alive. The danger comes when pleasure becomes safer than purpose. When novelty is used as armor against intimacy, against mortality, against the weight of meaning. The eternal boy reaches for stimulation not because he is greedy, but because he is afraid. Afraid of the stillness that purpose requires. Afraid of discovering who he is without the endless chase. Neuroscience gives language to this. Dopamine drives the thrill of pursuit, the spark that lights up when something new is within reach. Serotonin, by contrast, offers the grounding of satisfaction, the quiet peace of enough. A life dominated by dopamine feels exciting but unstable, always chasing, rarely resting. A life balanced with serotonin allows space to exhale, to belong, to feel whole. The Puer is drawn again and again to the former, fearing the silence of the latter. Here is the paradox. Indulgence in freedom soon becomes dependence on escape. What began as a taste of possibility turns into a cycle of craving. Each new thrill, whether scrolling, sex, or another drink, buys a brief moment of flight, but leaves the man emptier upon return. Pleasure becomes not a gift, but a chain, a compulsive loop that disguises itself as choice. And yet, even within that loop, there are traces of longing. The man scrolling at 2 a.m. may actually be searching for connection. The man chasing one high after another may actually be longing for peace. Beneath the surface, the hunger for novelty often hides a deeper hunger, to rest without fear, to feel alive without escape. There is a way to notice the difference. Over a span of days, watch the activities that call most strongly. Do they leave you more rooted or more restless? Do they fuel you or do they drain you? Such questions are not punishments but mirrors. They reveal whether pleasure is serving life or whether it is consuming it. The cultural image of the eternal boy, lost in the glow of endless scrolling, is not about weakness. It is about fear. Fear that stillness will expose emptiness. Fear that purpose will require limits. But purpose, unlike dopamine, does not vanish at dawn. It steadies. It roots. The task is not to reject pleasure, but to allow it to find its rightful place, as a companion to purpose, not its substitute. In this light, the seduction of the infinite becomes less about craving and more about clarity. Freedom is not escape. Freedom is the capacity to stay, to choose, to savor without being consumed. Picture the man who always finds himself drawn to the woman who cannot stay. She is radiant, magnetic, but never truly available. The bond feels electric, almost fated. Yet behind that intensity lies repetition, the same story, told with different faces. What he calls chemistry is often the echo of an older wound. Jung described the anima as the inner feminine image that shapes how a man relates to women, intimacy, and even his own soul. When this image is wounded, often through the early bond with the mother, it carries both longing and resentment. The eternal boy projects this inner figure onto partners. He turns women into saviors, expecting them to complete what was left unfinished. When they inevitably fail, he resents them as captors. The cycle turns intimacy into reenactment. For many men, attraction to the unavailable partner is not a mistake but a symptom. It repeats the early pattern of reaching for love that is inconsistent, conditional, or absent. The nervous system is wired to confuse intensity with safety, chaos with passion. To the eternal boy, commitment feels dangerous not because of the other person, but because being truly seen threatens to expose the hidden wound. If she looks too closely, she may discover the boy still hiding inside the man. This is why the fear of commitment is rarely about freedom alone. It is about visibility. To be committed is to be known, and to be known, for the wounded boy, feels unbearable. Better to keep chasing the one who never stays. Better to keep longing than to risk being fully seen. If you sit quietly with the memory of a past relationship, you may notice the pattern. Who did she represent? A rescuer, a rival, a mother. In that reflection lies a clue. The anima projection is not a verdict, only a mirror. What feels like destiny may simply be repetition, asking to be recognized. Across forums and quiet confessions, countless men describe this same experience, trapped in trauma bonds, unable to leave, yet unable to grow within them. Love becomes a cycle of reenactment rather than connection. What looks like romance is often the shadow replaying its script. The lover's trap is not hopelessness. It is an invitation to see intimacy differently, to recognize that real connection begins when projection softens, when the partner is allowed to be human rather than savior, to risk being seen not as the eternal boy or the perfect man, but as a whole person, flawed, vulnerable, capable of both giving and receiving love. The eternal boy seeks in women the healing of his first wound. But healing comes not by finding the perfect partner, but by turning toward the image within, naming it, and slowly loosening its grip. Only then does love shift from reenactment to relationship, from repetition to presence. There is a particular kind of heaviness that comes from carrying too much light. Many men know it well. The constant sense of potential, of greatness just out of reach, paired with the inability to move forward. The terror of mediocrity can be so strong that it paralyzes. Better to keep dreaming of what might be than to risk proving through action that it may never happen. This is the shadow of potential. To the eternal boy, potential feels safer than reality. In fantasy, he can be anything, brilliant, accomplished, admired. In practice, he must confront effort, failure, and imperfection. So he lingers in the dream, spinning endless ideas and plans, waiting for the perfect moment that never arrives. The result is a cycle of paralysis and procrastination, where the imagined life becomes more vivid than the lived one. Psychology offers a frame here: self-determination. Theory speaks of three elements that fuel real motivation: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Without these, potential remains abstract. Autonomy is the sense that choices are ours to make. Competence is the quiet confidence that skills grow through practice. Relatedness is the knowledge that effort connects us to others, that our work matters beyond the self. The eternal boy often misses one or more of these pieces. He clings to autonomy, but avoids competence. He dreams of relatedness, but fears intimacy. And so potential floats untethered, never crystallizing into form. The paradox is cruel. By clinging to infinite possibility, he ensures no real achievement. He protects himself from disappointment, but also from fulfillment. The wings of imagination lift him high, but without the wax of discipline, they cannot hold. Like Icarus, he soars on fantasy, only to fall when reality asks for weight. Think of the countless notebooks filled with half-written plans, the guitar gathering dust in the corner, the business ideas sketched but never launched. These are not failures. They are relics of a deeper fear, that stepping fully into one thing means closing the door on many others. To the boy, narrowing feels like death. But in truth, narrowing is birth. It is the moment a seed chooses to root, giving up infinite possibility in order to grow into one living tree. A gentle way to meet this fear is through rhythm rather than grand gestures. A commitment of 30 minutes, 3 times a week, for 30 days. Small, steady, undeniable. This is not about proving worth, but about breaking the spell of fantasy. Each act of consistency pulls potential out of shadow and into daylight. Each repetition teaches the nervous system that effort is not annihilation, but integration. The image of Icarus remains powerful here. His fall is not only a warning about hubris, but also a lesson about balance. Wings alone are not enough. They must be bound with discipline, with patience, with humility. Only then does flight become sustainable. The shadow of potential is not an enemy. It is a reminder that greatness is not born in fantasy, but in the small, steady gestures of growth. The eternal boy resists this, fearing that structure will kill his light. Yet discipline does not extinguish the flame. It gives it form. Without it, the fire burns out. With it, the fire can warm, guide, and endure. At the heart of the Puer's story lies a quiet truth. His fear of death is not really about death at all. It is about life. The eternal boy resists limits because he senses deep down that to live fully is to accept both creation and loss, both joy and grief. To commit to anything, a path, a love, a craft, is to face mortality in miniature, and so he avoids. But in avoiding, he does not escape death. He escapes life. Jung spoke of integration as the meeting of opposites. The Puer, with his lightness, imagination, and hunger for freedom, needs the senex, the archetype of order, discipline, and continuity. Without the senex, the boy floats. Without the boy, the senex hardens into rigidity. Together, they form a whole. Together, they allow creativity that is both free and grounded. The spell of eternal youth is broken not by exile, but by marriage. The boy wedded to the elder, the dreamer held by the structure that lets him create. There is a counterintuitive truth here. Structure is not a cage. It is fuel. Think of a river. Without banks, water disperses and disappears into the ground. With banks, the river flows strong, carving valleys, giving life. Limits do not weaken freedom. They channel it into power. The eternal boy fears that structure will kill his vitality. But what it really kills is chaos. What remains is flow. One way to approach this is not through grand vows, but through a single chosen ritual. Something small, non-negotiable, repeated daily. Waking at the same hour, or beginning the morning with breath before screens, or setting aside a half hour for craft. These rituals are not about control, they are about rhythm. Each repetition builds trust with the self. Each limit becomes a doorway to greater freedom. Consider Nietzsche's thought experiment of eternal recurrence. Imagine living this very day, exactly as it is, over and over for eternity. Would that feel unbearable, or would it feel whole? The eternal boy flees such a thought, terrified of repetition. Yet hidden within it is an invitation to live today in a way one would not dread repeating, to ground life so deeply that its rhythm could be endured forever. Breaking the spell of the Puer does not mean killing him. It means inviting him into maturity. The boy's vitality is needed, his wonder, his creativity, his refusal to settle for lifeless routine. But those gifts find their shape only when rooted. The spell breaks the moment the boy sees that limits do not end his freedom. They give it form. To become a grounded creator is not to leave behind magic. It is to bring magic into the world in ways that endure, ways that others can touch, taste, and trust. The eternal boy, when integrated, becomes not a wanderer lost in Neverland, but a builder who can shape life with both wings and roots. Picture a young tree. In its first years, it stretches upward recklessly, thin and fragile, as if racing the sky. But it cannot remain this way. Sooner or later, the winds come. To survive, the tree must stop chasing only the heavens and begin sending roots down into the earth. Only then does it gain the strength to bear fruit. The eternal boy within each man is like that tree. His wings of wax lift him high, but without roots, he cannot endure. The The journey we have walked together is not about killing that boy. It is about grounding him. The Puer carries gifts that are essential: wonder, imagination, a refusal to let life become only duty and routine. But left unanchored, those gifts collapse under their own weight. When rooted in discipline, in limits chosen with care, the boy's vitality transforms into creativity that lasts. Think back to the themes we traced. The rebellion against the father revealed a hidden hunger for structure. The seduction of infinite pleasure showed how freedom without grounding becomes dependence. In love, the anima wounds replay old stories until they are seen with new eyes. The shadow of potential reminded us that greatness without discipline is just fantasy. And breaking the spell showed that integration, not exile, is the key. Puer and senex together, wings and stone, dream and ground. The deeper truth is this: integration is not punishment. It is permission. To step into limits is to step into power. To accept mortality is to embrace life. To let go of fantasy is to taste reality. What begins as loss ends as wholeness. So perhaps the invitation is simple, though not easy. Instead of asking, "How do I get rid of the boy in me?" ask, "What would it look like if he finally grew strong enough to stand?" Imagine carrying his vitality into adulthood, not as a burden, but as a root system, anchoring you so that your fruit may ripen. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence reminds us, if today repeated forever, would it be a day worth living? That question need not bring despair. It can serve as compass. A day lived with presence, discipline, and rooted vitality is a day that could be repeated without shame. From wings of wax to roots of stone, the story of the Puer Aeternus does not end in tragedy. It ends in transformation. When the boy is welcomed into manhood, not killed but grounded, he becomes capable of bearing fruit that nourishes not only himself, but others. And perhaps that is the quiet triumph of growing older, not losing wonder, but finally giving it form.